95. We are interviewing Mr. Leo Pop, L-E-O-P-O-P.
My name is Leo Pop, P-O-P.
Your birth date, please.
October 4, 1934.
And your age today?
That's 61.
And what city and country were you born in?
I was born in Amsterdam in the Netherlands.
Could you describe your life before the occupation? Where did you live?
I have lived till 1943 in Amsterdam. We all lived, I had a brother, and we lived in a three-story home. We lived on the 3rd floor. And most of the relatives, my grandparents from both sides, uncles and aunts lived all in a direction close to where we are, around maybe 5 miles at the most.
What did your father do for a living?
My father was a sales representative for cosmetic products, and he worked basically out of Amsterdam.
And his name?
His name was Solomon. And my mother's name was Anna, and my brother's name was Johnny. 4 years younger. He was born in 1938. Well, my parents was very close family with the relatives, my grandparents. We spent quite a bit of time visiting each other. My uncles and aunts. My father had 3 brothers who were married. My mother had 2 brothers and 3 sisters. One of my sister's mother had a daughter, was my niece, Rita, who also survived the war after, and that's basically the only one of the whole family, beside my aunt, Dorothy, that was the youngest sister of my mother. We celebrated, or whatever you want to call it, the Jewish Passover, we did Hanukkah and so on. We celebrated those, but not that we really went religious and went to synagogue. I remember having gone there once or twice with, not even with my parents, but with the neighbors downstairs, the Jewish district really. What, by the way, is all broken down now and completely disappeared. But that was quite active. We went quite often down there to visit, because one of my father's brothers lived near there too. He was a principal of one of the schools, and we went to visit him quite often. I went to kindergarten. The location of that kindergarten was just behind the building where later on the Jewish people were all gathered before they were put on transport. But of course I went to that kindergarten before the war. Then in 1940 when I turned 6, I went to the normal school to start grade 1. I went just there for, I guess, 1.5 years, and that time the Germans stopped, Jewish people going to school, and that I never attended any more than the first and part of the 2nd grade.
Do you remember your parents talking about Hitler, Nazism?
Well, Nazism, that of course came up, and I know not really, I was too young really to realize what it was, but I know my parents, especially my father, talking with his brothers and, with his brother-in-laws. They hoped it would be the same as in 1914, that Holland would be spared.
Do you remember when the Nazis invaded Holland?
I remember being with my parents on the balcony of the house on the 3rd level, and we could see the planes come over. Living in Amsterdam, we were fortunately not bombed, but we saw the German planes come and go, and didn't take long after that, a couple of days before they really entered the city. Well, it didn't take long before they really started to start putting down laws. Like, you were not allowed to have radios, you had to turn them all in, you had to, no bikes, all this, and and then gradually they started to limit your, where you went and what you did, and then of course in I guess it was 42 or 43 that they came out that you had Jewish people over 6 years old had to wear the Star of David, show to everybody, where you were and who you were. Yeah, I remember kind of vaguely wearing it for the first time. Actually, at that time, being young, you kind of thought it would be, it was kind of an honor, as such, that you had to wear a Star of David or because you were Jewish. And I remember one of my brothers of my mother got married in front of a synagogue. There I had to wear the Star of David. I had to wear the Star of David to play outside and all this, and that had bad consequences because you had so many kids who really, had it in for you and gave you a rough time. Dirty Jew and all this. I remember having a ball and, they took it away and there was nothing you could do because, you were not supposed to play. I was not supposed to be as Jewish to go in the parks anymore because that was all not allowed. And we lived close to a park and we couldn't even go in and play in the sandbox or whatever it was, we were not allowed to go in the park. So you had to stay kind of on the street where everybody could see you. And then in the end of 42 they started the razzias, where they started to take care of the Jewish people and pick them up from the street originally. When you had the star, they could easily see that. And then later on they came and picked up the people what they had the list of and went to the houses. I remember some of the relatives being picked up. Where I lived in Amsterdam, we had the square. That's where they had kind of, more or less, they gathered them. They had the trucks there, and I have seen a couple of my uncles and aunts being put on transport right there. And there was nothing you could do, of course, we're all, German heavy weapons and all this, so, I know a couple of uncles and aunts who were picked out of their houses with my nieces and that, and they were from there transported to the downtown in Amsterdam, from where they put on transport to the concentration camps. Where we lived, we had an attic where we thought would some hiding places for. So my uncles and aunts and all this, they started to bring their silverware and all the jewelry and all this what they had. They brought them over to be put down in the attic there in the places. I know my grandparents bought stuff, my uncles, my aunts, and we had quite a bit of put down. It was all behind boards and walls. Coming back after the war to that house, there was nothing left, so somewhere along the line the neighbors they knew about it too, so they must have taken care of it. So then gradually my family became smaller and smaller. My grandparents from my father's side were picked up, put up there downtown, and then put to transportation. My father found out, and he went down to the building where they are all housed, and he was trying to get him out, to buy him out one way or another. He was picked up and put on transport, and he escaped. He came home one night all damaged, wounded, because he had jumped out of the train, going down to, I guess, Westerbork or whatever concentration camp there was in Holland, and then they went from there up to Czechoslovakia or whatever. They wanted to exchange the Jewish people from Poland with the one in Holland. That's what we were told by the Germans and by the news media there in Holland. They just wanted to exchange that, bring the Polish Jews over to Holland, and we had to go to Poland.
Did people believe that?
Well, maybe in the beginning, because at that time they asked for volunteers. I know none of my family ever, relatives went as volunteer, not till they were picked up later on.
What were your grandparents' names?
My mother's side was Jonas and Betty. My father's side was Leopold, what I am called after, and my grandmother was Judith. My father's parents were picked up, relatively early in the season, and later on I found they were already killed in April 1943 in Sobibor. My mother's grandparents stayed a little longer. From time to time, the Germans had the big razzias in the big cities, And the underground kept my parents kind of aware of when they were coming. You know, we had some collaborators, I guess, if you want to call it that, in the German organization who told the underground, well, they are planning to do this and that and that. So, you know, we always, well, not always, but quite often we knew about their plans. And then you kind of try to hide or whatever. It became so bad in 1943, when they really started, that my parents decided that it was time for my brother and myself to find places and to move on. My brother went, I guess, in May 43, early May, I guess. And then the underground started to look for a place for me because they just couldn't pick you up and, you know, without knowing where they could bring you. And I know my parents were also waiting for an address to go to. But as it turned out, they never made it.
Did you know where your brother went?
No, I didn't. I was just told he went on holidays. I was still home. That was in 43. I was, 8 years old. So, and he was 4, and he was picked up by the underground, and, you know, he went on holidays. That's how I was told. Sometime in June, again, like I mentioned before, we got note that there was going to be a big razzia in Amsterdam. And we lived, like I say, at the house, a 3-story house. However, under the house was a crawl space, maybe 2 feet high. So we moved in the crawl space. That was right at the, when you come into the building, was a deck or, you know, under the carpet where you could move in. We moved into there and we lived there for a couple of days. The neighbors on the 2nd floor knew because they brought us food. Till finally, I don't say we have been in there maybe 1 or 2 days. They finally moved to the house where we were, and you could see them come because the crawl space had to be vented and aired. And one of the German booths was right in front of the crawl space, and we was on the other side of the girl. And he had to standing there as ass or whatever it was with the gun and all this. You heard the other one breaking into the house and going upstairs to the 3rd floor where we lived, supposed to have lived. The neighbors told them that we had been picked up already. So they didn't really, fortunately, didn't start searching all over. After they left, they put on a seal that house, you know, people had gone. And then real collaborators could go in with one of the German high commands and take out whatever they felt was what they could use. So after they had left, maybe hours later or the next day, I don't remember, we went back up and there were all the seals. So we had to break to get into our own house. And that was just then my parents really got hold of the underground and said, well, it's time to move. So within a few days I was taken by the underground to my hiding place.
Did your parents prepare you for your being taken?
Well, they just told me it was just for a small holiday. That's what they, you know. And they were going to go on holidays themselves too. You know, they didn't know where I was going or nothing. Just that, you know, the underground was, you know, going to take care of it. And I remember, you know, saying goodbye and moving with the person who picked me up at the house down to the streetcar without the star because I was, you know, you couldn't have that on. At the corner of the square was a laundry, or, you know, for washing facilities. And I was trying to move back, to turn around to see one more look at him. And he says, don't look back, because there were all kind of collaborators living around there too. And so that's how I moved. Went with the underground to the railroad station. And then in the train, of course, we had inspection all the time. And I really don't know how they managed to get that done, but they managed to get me down to the southern province.
What was your story?
Well, nothing then. I was just going on holidays. He was taking me to, you know, to the southern part to go on holidays for a couple, because in Amsterdam there was limited food supplies and dangers and all this. So, I was told I was supposed to go on holidays. And then I ended up in Limburg, in the city of Heerlen. I was brought to a family what had offered to hide Jewish people. And, I got there, of course, you miss your parents and all this, but the part was the next day I was outside on the road, and holding below, there I see my brother, who had gone a couple of weeks before me, and I didn't know where he was. He just happened to be by people right across the street. So that was, that didn't go, of course. That since my brother had been already at those people for a couple of weeks, they decided right away I had to move again. And I moved and switched with some other boy who also was from Amsterdam, who I also knew because he lived across from my niece in Amsterdam. And I was brought to another residence where I stayed for the rest of the war.
Can we go back a little bit?
Certainly.
To the time you were hidden with your parents.
Yeah.
What did they tell you about talking, about laughing, about eating when you were hidden?
Well, nothing. I mean, at that time we realized it was too dangerous to be, and at that time I knew too what they were after. It was just not, holidays like, because the danger was right outside. And, the people on the second floor, they brought us some food, whatever was available, to eat while we were hiding in that place.
How did you go to the washroom?
Just in the corner. We couldn't get out, we couldn't straighten out. It was just almost not even 2 feet high. Another thing what I should have mentioned, we lived on number 3. A couple homes over was a German, was a SS headquarters. So you could always see them come in and out and all this, so, there was very dangerous close by and all this as well.
Did you see any acts of cruelty?
Oh yeah, we saw, I've seen enough, because those people, when they were put on the transportation, they didn't, well, it was all kind of ages, of course, young people, older people, and if they didn't move fast enough, they just did, just with the gun, hit them and all this. I've seen some people being shot, people trying to escape from there.